Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Pick Six podcast. I'm Sam McKewon, along with one of our heavy hitters, Tom Shatel, here this week. Dirk will be back next week, and we might even get an Evan and Jimmy sighting. Tom, how you doing?
Just don't make me get on a scale. I mean, heavy is one thing, scales are another. I'm happy to be here. This is a fun thing every week.
Your Dodgers are out?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and but I'm in a strange place. Yes, Dodgers all the way, but I grew up in San Diego, so they didn't have a team then. That's why I went to see the Dodgers an hour and a half up the coast. So I'm a San Diego guy too, and I want the Padres to win. So it was a weird feeling last weekend to watch them. I watched the city celebrate after they beat my team. I was kind of celebrating along with them, but yet I wasn't. So very strange. Somebody said, "Well, how can you root for the Padres?" Well, they're not really a rival. I could never root for the Giants ever. So that's the difference. But yeah,
It'd be their third World Series.
They
if they made it.
You know, what do you do with the team that wins 111 games? And
I thought they had too much pressure. I told you that. I thought they were going to have a hard time. That's what I thought.
My feeling is they didn't have enough urgency.
No,
and they make it so they win every year.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll try it again next year.
Yeah.
So I think some of these teams like the Phillies and I mean, not necessarily the Astros. The Astros are there all the time too, but it's just like the Padres and Phillies. This is their shot in a lot of ways. They don't do this all the time, so there's more urgency. There's more.
Yeah, Nebraska needs a little bit of that urgency, don't they?
Well,
but they're kind of like that now because, like, Ohio State is like the Dodgers.
Yeah,
and you know, Ohio State's going to get there every year, and they lose in the playoff. And Nebraska needs to have this passion, right? Like
we talked about that. Nebraska needs to embrace that role first.
Yeah,
instead of acting like, well, we're Nebraska.
It's time to be the underdog.
We're supposed to be here,
right?
No, so, but that'll be the job of the next coach, and
well.
We can segue into that.
We're going to talk about the Nebraska coaching search here on the Pick Six podcast. We'll talk a little bit about basketball too. Maybe talk a little bit of the Purdue game and then what's coming up. I want to remind folks. I know there are people who listen to this podcast who are subscribers to the podcast and subscribers to the Omaha World-Herald, and that's awesome. I want to remind people who are listening to this podcast, whether it's on Spotify or on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts at, that you can subscribe to the Omaha World-Herald. www.omaha.com/subscribe. Omaha.com, /subscribe. That's where you want to go. And it's a good deal, right? So you get 26 weeks for $1. That's going to take you all the way through basically the spring game of next year. We are going to have the most hellacious December that we've had pretty much ever. When you think about it, the transfer portal opens on December 5th. By then, Nebraska will have a head football coach. I'm confident of that. They will not go past probably the first 2 days of the weekend after Thanksgiving. I think we're going to see a new Nebraska football coach introduced on the Sunday after Thanksgiving, 2 days after Black Friday. That seems to be the day. At the very latest, I think it would be the following Sunday. So December is going to be woo, and you want to subscribe.
I'm pointing more toward that Tuesday or Wednesday.
Yeah,
I think it comes out that Sunday.
It could be.
I don't think there's a press conference because more than likely the guy they hire is going to have a game on that Saturday. So unless it's somebody who doesn't have a job, which there are those guys too, but. A lot of the candidates are coaching, and they're going to be coaching at Saturday. So I think it could come out afterwards. And then maybe Tuesday or Wednesday. That's sort of the timetable I have in my head, but we'll see.
That's basically how USC got Lincoln Riley last year. We didn't know anything about Lincoln Riley going to USC until after Oklahoma loses to Oklahoma State in Bedlam. And I suspect it could be very much that again. Again, omaha.com/subscribe. You can get Tom's work, my work, Dirk's work, everything right there. Okay, let's start with the coaching search. Nebraska's 3-4 right now. Obviously, we saw the game at Purdue. It was thrilling in its own way, but to me, the game also underlined once again, Nebraska was playing from behind almost all the game, and let's be honest, they got beat on the line of scrimmage. And as I think about watching that game again, which I did on the bumpy drive in the middle of nowhere in Indiana. I watched 30 minutes of it, and then the following morning, about 6 a.m., I watched the entire game again. I am just struck by the fact that Nebraska football is so far away from where it was even 9 years ago. The first time they went to Purdue, and the dominance on the line of scrimmage has gone. It's gone. Like, Nebraska and Purdue switched places. Nebraska and Illinois switched places. To me, that's one of the biggest and most driving concerns going forward, and I think it does inform the coaching search. If you listen to Trev Alberts on Tuesday night on the radio, his comment about, when Tom Osborne fired Bill Callahan, he said football is still a Spartan sport. He said that in the press conference. On Tuesday night, Trev Alberts said football is still a gladiatorial sport.
And here we are, history repeating itself. That's maddening.
Yeah.
I mean, when are you going to listen? But when did they switch with Illinois? I mean, when was Nebraska, I guess, on top? I know the Bow years, they beat Illinois and they beat Purdue every single year.
They beat Purdue 45-14
I never really thought,
and that was a butt kick.
I never really thought Bow. I thought their offensive lines were certainly better than they are now.
They are.
But they did not.
Their defensive lines were better. I mean, that's part of it.
Yeah.
They don't have a Malik Collins or a Randy Grant.
I know. Exactly. Nebraska's
But they
defensive,
did. I mean, Illinois has beaten them the last
line,
2 years.
But their defensive line was better last year, too. It's just, I thought they were going to get wiped off the field last week. And I think my column may have reflected, I didn't mean to sound excited or like I was overly impressed, but I kind of was. I thought these guys were going to get just hammered.
Yeah.
I think it's going to collapse at some point. It just has to. And the fact that it's still being propped up with all this emotion and playing hard, and a couple of guys just throwing the ball around.
Yeah.
Casey Thompson, Trey.
That's kind of
how is Trey Palmer always open? What's wrong with you, Purdue?
Purdue's stubborn.
I mean, so
they're stubborn. I think they were stubborn, and I think they allowed Trey Palmer to get man-on-man coverage in situations where Trey Palmer should not be covered by one guy.
How long can that last? So I
don't think Illinois will do that.
I no, but I just expect it. Nebraska, when is it going to just collapse? So I feel like they're just going on fumes right now, and but they're at home, and I think that makes the next two games kind of interesting to me.
It does,
because you're home, you got a little extra behind you. Something goes wrong early for the other guys. Hey, we've seen what happens in that stadium. So anyway, but yeah, I watched that game unfold and going, okay, Purdue keeps running down the field, scoring every time. It's just going to end at some point. Nebraska's just going to collapse, and it didn't. So
no, that's very true. That's fair. That's fair. I mean, they fought. There's no question about that. They didn't get Purdue off the field when they had to, but they played really hard.
They could have won. I mean, I could have won.
They could have won,
but they had Purdue going for 4th and 1.
Yeah.
On their own field late in the game. That never crossed my mind that would be like that. So
I did not expect to see Nebraska average 13 yards per reception. Yeah, I didn't expect that, and that's exactly what happened.
And that was their only chance. They can't run the ball, or they won't. I think teams that can. I think you love the box against Nebraska because Nebraska can't block. So if you love the box, you're going to win against Nebraska right now. So they have to figure out, the running game kind of has to be the short passing game, unless you pass so much that they back off the line a little bit. But I don't know. It's I keep thinking, when is this? And I put in there, okay, Mickey's still hanging in there.
Right.
Let's see where it goes. Because we talked about this last week. We thought, okay, this would be it for the Mick. He's probably either he wins and he's rolling, or he loses and it's over.
Right.
And I still feel like it's not over, but it's getting really close.
If they won the next two, I think people would be pretty fired up. And it's, again, we've talked about this before. Nebraska is due for a break.
Yeah.
Like, they're due to win some games that they shouldn't win. And maybe that happens the next 2 weeks. The question becomes, well, there's a couple questions, but one of them is, does short-term success inform a long-term commitment to whatever Mickey Joseph wants to do? Or is it just short-term success? Do you have to go out and find somebody who's done this before, knows how to do it, wants to do it, all those things? The question that you brought up to me on Tuesday when you dropped by the office, and I appreciate the fact that you're kind of drop by the office a lot and make a presence in here. Big name, I like that. Here's the point you made to me. Well, what is it? Where does keeping Mickey Joseph, regardless of whether he's the head coach, rank or rate in the priority list of Trev Alberts' maybe like must-haves?
Yeah, I think the search right now revolves around Mickey in every angle you go around. It's really interesting to me because it all goes back to when he came back here last year. He got a 3-year deal, and I remember people saying, "Well, he wouldn't come back here if he thought the head coach was going to get fired. He wouldn't just come back here for a year. So maybe he's the next guy, or maybe he's going to stay." And I think that there's a lot of logic to that. Did you have to give him 3 years? I think maybe he said, "All right, if I'm going to get fired with Scott, I want the extra payday. I want 2 more years to go with it."
Right.
Maybe that's part of it. But I think we're at a point now where if he doesn't get the job, which it just seems less and less likely that he will. Is he part of the next coach? And to me, that goes both ways. He's a very valuable asset in a lot of ways. Just players take to him. He's got a little Switzer, little Barry Switzer in him. People, want to be around him. He gets them to play hard. He gets them to basically do whatever he wants. That's a valuable guy to have. Also, the recruiting angle, the transfer portal, he's got a good eye for talent. That's a big plus. Some guys can recruit because they just have a sales pitch, but he's got a good eye. And that's a very valuable thing in trying to build a program. So, obviously, a good guy to have around. Maybe as the number 2, the lieutenant, the assistant, head coach, whatever you want to call it. But what if you don't want that guy? What I'm saying is, does Mickey? Okay, you have to keep him. I don't like necessarily doing that because I don't like telling a candidate what he has to come in here. We'll hire you, but there's this one condition: you have to like this guy. You have to work with him. Now, some guys have no problem doing that. Some would. I don't know if I like asking a guy to do that, but it might be the case here because he is so valuable, and Trev loves him.
Well, that points to one candidate. I mean, what the scenario you just laid out points to one specific candidate.
Who?
David Aranda.
Right.
Because that's the guy that wouldn't even have to have a hesitation.
But I think you could bring in.
But the question is, can you sell other coaches?
I think Leipold was a guy that's been here and would. Okay, Mickey's a Husker. I like those people. Or maybe it's just he's here for a year or two, and then he kind of keeps building his resume, and then he goes to be a head coach somewhere else. But in any case, it might keep guys from coming here. Well, it's a deal breaker for me.
It kept Jim Grobe back in the day.
Yeah.
Jim Grobe interviewed for the job at the end of 2007, and remember he said to news media that he wanted to bring his staff, and T.O. basically said, we got an offensive guy here. And they did. Sean Watson.
Oh, boy.
Now, to be clear, remember,
talking about a deal breaker.
well, but that's what Grobe said. Now, I'm not saying what he said was true, but the point is that, like, when Bo Pelini came here, Bo Pelini didn't have to think about his offense because Sean Watson was going to run that for Bo.
Right.
And he did. He ran it for 3 years, and then Bo fired him because that's not what Bo wanted.
See, that was, I know, I totally agree with all that. And Tom says he never told Frank he had to keep all these guys, but we all know that come on, and I think it was good.
Why wouldn't you want to keep Charlie McBride?
Well, I think it was good to do that, but then at some point you have to break. And Frank didn't know when to say when. And
he didn't know how to move on from, like, once Charlie McBride decided to retire, that was the time to go out and hire your own guy,
and
not to promote somebody else.
And that was Bo. I think Bo knew after the Washington, the second game that year that we lost to Washington in the Holiday Bowl, it was an absolute disaster. And coming off the Big 12 championship, lost to Oklahoma in the second half, where he kept having Taylor Martinez throw off the injured leg.
Then he had him run a route as a receiver, and Rex Burkhead throw.
Yeah, it's. I mean, but at that point, he knew, okay, I have to get rid of this. I have to. So.
Right.
Anyway, I think this is a fascinating search because it seems to revolve. We don't know this. We're not podcast throwing this stuff out. But I giving Mickey 3 years. It told me that Trev wants him around. I think he does want him around. He's a great influence on everything, but not every coach is going to see that.
Well. What makes the conversation interesting is that Trev has been really clear about wanting a grinder who wants to develop players into a culture of toughness. He's hit those three things every time. He's talked about character. He's talked about development. He's talked about toughness. Mm-hmm. He says Nebraska is going to have the premier developmental facility in the country once the new building is done. So everything seems to line up as go get, a grinder type that's going to recruit top 50, top 40 recruiting classes and kind of develop those over the years, use a little bit of transfer portal, but not too much, and, turn the dial way down on the flash and turn it way up on the oatmeal. The challenge is that, and I really believe this, if you watch the season, if you've watched the season play out, Husker fans, there are two teams in the Big Ten West that did not get better in the offseason through the transfer portal, and that's Wisconsin and Iowa. And they just didn't add much. I mean, Purdue's best receiver is from Iowa, is Iowa's former best receiver. And Iowa just didn't get much better, and neither did Wisconsin, and quite frankly, they're struggling as a result. And I don't think you can go into a Big Ten that's about to add USC and UCLA and think that you're going to build, a ham and egg stand. I just don't. I think you have to be really honest about the quality of player that you need. And then if you want to do the developmental piece, I think that's good. I think the culture of toughness is good. You need to recruit kids who are willing to be a little bit patient. But you have to be able to hit that transfer portal button 5 to 7 to even 10 times a year. Because imagine, Tom, Nebraska football without Casey Thompson and Trey Palmer right now. Right. Because I think Adrian was leaving either way. And Adrian entered the transfer portal, but he could have anyway because he had graduated. And so imagine Nebraska football. Because remember, when Nebraska parted ways with Adrian, they didn't know who they were getting. They didn't know. They didn't know. And so, they didn't know for sure who they were going to get. So they parted ways with Adrian knowing that they might get a worse player. But they got Casey and they got Trey, largely because of Mickey, and this is the challenge that's in place for Nebraska: is where does retaining that guy, who will be able to give any new coach a complete rundown on the roster, where does retaining that guy fit in the prioritization list? And is there a coach out there who could say, I don't want Mickey on the staff, no offense to him, but I want to do my own thing, that would get this job because he's so good that you can basically say, I don't want any of the institutional knowledge that's already there. What coach would that be?
Yeah, I think Mickey is you talk about the grinder and the coaching character and all that. That's him. He's not just a BS artist who recruits. He's a guy that likes to get down in the dirt and get after it. I mean, he's a coach's coach in a lot of ways. I would think a lot of coaches would want a guy like that around, but what they don't, coaches are all funny guys. They're kind of a funny species. They're I don't know you, so are you going to stab me in the back? Are you going to work against me because you didn't get the job? Do you want the job? And are you going to try to sabotage me and to get the job? And they can, whether that could be 100% not the case with Mickey, but try and get a coach to believe that they're all paranoid creatures. They're all
right.
But I think, he'd be very valuable. As far as the roster, I mean, half the roster might be gone. I mean, I expect a lot of these guys to just leave. Or else the new coach come in and go, I don't want you. I mean, it's risky because you got to have players next year. But a lot of these guys might come in and go, I don't want this roster.
Right.
I'm gonna flip this roster next year too anyway.
Well, you got to be careful with that, though.
I know you do. But
that's what Scott Frost did. It didn't go well.
I know. So to what Trev wants to do, you bring a guy in here. Okay, you may not like these guys, but I expect you're getting paid to coach these guys up. So I think that's what's going to happen. As far as the type of roster going forward, I'm all in on this developmental thing. I really am. I don't care about USC or UCLA or what everybody else in the Big Ten is doing. Nebraska needs to focus on just being the best program they can be right now. They're at the very bottom. They're at the bottom of the barrel. They don't have a whole lot going. They don't have any base. There's no foundation. They've got to start from scratch. So, you can worry about beating those guys down the road. I think if, Lance Leipold has shown us you can win some games in that second year, maybe even the first year. But I think the future is the past. Nebraska had the foundation, the development. Of course, they had 200 players back in the Osborne days. But they always brought guys in like the Roziers and Gills and Steve Taylors who they won games for you, but they had the foundation too. I think that's what Trev was around as a player. He saw that. He was around when they brought Tommy Frazier in. I mean, so he knows you can do both, but the first piece has to be development, and it goes with the new building. And they're going to do away with divisions in the Big Ten. I think that really is going to be interesting to see if that changes Wisconsin and Iowa's approach. I don't think it will, but if there's no Big Ten West, you kind of have to play a certain way to win the West. If there's no West and everybody's trying to get in the top 3 or 4 to make the playoff, do you change how you do it? I think that'll be interesting.
Well, you're not. So we're clear. Iowa and Wisconsin, who I think both of us would describe as the best teams in the Big Ten, they haven't beaten Michigan and Ohio State with any consistency in recent years. Ohio State hasn't lost to Wisconsin in 11 years. Iowa did beat Ohio State in 2017, the Woodshed game. I get it. That's the only win they have. So, the idea that either one of those programs are very close to Michigan and Ohio State, they're not.
Right.
And if you go back and look at the history of USC and UCLA, I'm not saying that they're going to come in and win the Big Ten. But what I will say is that at no time in their history, and you know this, have they ever been Rutgers and Maryland in football.
Right.
They've always been. If even their bad years, they're winning 4 or 5. And in their good years, they're really good. And so, Rutgers in a bad year is 1-11, and you can just count on beating them. USC and UCLA, not that way. And so, it's the minute those teams come in the league, and the way I was describing it on the Showdown with Amy is, okay, so let's say the Big Ten is a 3-bid league for the college football playoff. Mm-hmm. Well, the first bid going to Ohio State. The second bid, so long as Harbaugh's there, might be going to Michigan. And then that third team is, if you're going to be the third team, you have to be better than Penn State, USC, UCLA, Wisconsin, Iowa, Maryland, Michigan State. You have to jump all of those programs.
What you're describing is a Nebraska program that might go to the playoff once every 10 years.
Yeah.
So, and that's fine. And that's being at their best.
Is it fine?
Well, it's reality. You can't keep firing coaches because you can't go to the playoff. It's not reality. Everybody's got that reality. Are they all going to fire coaches?
Hey, you're not going to get any argument from me. I'm just saying that when readers and listeners think about it, what you just said, going to the playoff once every 10 years, Nebraska puts more resources into Husker football than almost any program in the nation.
Well, who is going to the playoff every year? 2 or 3 of them.
Alabama,
That's
Ohio
it.
State,
That's
and Clemson.
it. So my point is, all this stuff is
and
like
Georgia.
All this stuff is like 5 years away. So that's fine. I mean, trying to go to the playoff, and Nebraska needs to block and tackle.
But you have to hire a coach with the intention of having it, right?
Absolutely.
But we also decisions made now affect 5 years.
But we also have to understand that the guy they hire now is being brought in. He's being brought in to build. Maybe not win a championship. Maybe he's a bridge. Maybe he builds it to 8-4. Okay, thank you for your time. We're going to go hire somebody who can, I guess, quote unquote, finish the job.
Right.
That might be the case here. But my point is, you can't go from this point to that point without doing all the other stuff. And they got to do all the hard stuff now. And but hey, you tell me Matt Campbell, Kleiman, Aranda don't have designs on the playoff? Sure they do. That's why they come to Nebraska. They come here because you can do those things here. That's why you hire a dreamer. You hire a guy with he's got big designs. So I don't expect the next guy to fail after he builds. I expect him to say, okay, now I'm ready.
Well, let me.
But I'm just saying.
Right.
I understand what you're saying, but I just the portal and all that stuff. Yeah, you need it, but you can't depend on it. And I think what Trev wants to do is absolutely the right thing to do because they have to go back to. I mean, this has to be a place where you develop.
Right.
It has to be because you're not going to recruit. Everybody can recruit now, and especially with the portal. I almost think that's Nebraska's better angle. Go after the lower rated recruits and develop them, make them better than they've ever been, and then go get the select guys out of the portal who fit the culture. And I just like Ray McDermott has done every year. Basketball is different; there's only 5 guys, but same point. Go get guys who fit. And I like the guys they brought in this year. They're really good guys. We don't get to see Trey Palmer very often or really talk to him that much, but I like and the way they're hanging in there. They're playing hard. I mean, I like these guys. They didn't just come in to get the paycheck. So I think that's been good.
I'm going to present to you a question that I'm going to call AL East versus AL Central, but it's actually also a football question. Yeah. Or we could go NL West versus AL Central, but here's the deal. So as you well know, in the AL East and in the NL West, just to win in either one of those divisions in baseball, you have to beat the Yankees, you have to beat the Dodgers. But if you do that, you have a good chance of doing more. And then you also, the Dodgers and the Yankees win World Series and things like that. The Red Sox have won a bunch. If you go back and look at the number of World Series that the AL East has won in the last 30 years, I don't know, it's like 9. Well, how many is the AL Central won? And we both know the answer to that. 2, the Royals and the White Sox. So here's my question to you as it relates to football. You're Lance Leipold, you're Matt Campbell, you're Dave Aranda. You can either take your chances of winning the Big 12
Right.
every single year and getting that one bid that the Big 12 is going to get to the playoff. Knowing the Texas, Oklahoma are over here in the SEC, you can either take your chances with winning that league and getting the one bid that you know you're going to get, or you can join the Big 10 knowing it's going to get 3 bids, knowing that one of the bids is basically going to Ohio State, and having to beat the other 15 teams or 14 teams for one of the other 2. Which to you, and let's assume they can pay roughly the same amount of money for the job. Which one's more palatable?
I don't know. They both sound tough.
Well, which one would you rather have if you're a coach?
I'd rather go to the place where what gives me the best chance. They're both hard to do. Big 12 is really hard. Everybody's pretty even. There's a lot of good teams in the Big 12.
Well, the reason they're even is because Ohio State's not in it. The Big Ten's even if Ohio State's not there.
I think you can move up easier in the Big 10. I think you can jump over
to number 2?
Well, I think you have to be in the top 4.
Okay.
I think they're going to get 3. The 4th will be in the debate.
Right.
Yes,
I agree.
I think. Yeah, if you look at I think if you're confident enough, if you're going to try to be a playoff team, you're going to be better than Wisconsin and Iowa and Minnesota, Northwestern, Illinois, Michigan State, Indiana, the Boilers. All those teams are good, solid teams. We're talking about a playoff team. We're talking about the level of like Michigan and Penn State level, right?
Yeah.
Well, they're all better than those. So I mean, they are year in and year out expect to beat those teams. I think you go to look at the Big Ten and go, I can be better than. But if I have to be better than Oklahoma State and Cincinnati and Houston's going to be a bear when they get going. When they start getting in that league, they're going to be unbelievable.
So in the Big 12, since the inception of the playoff,
it's tough, yeah.
One team, Oklahoma, has made it. No one else has.
But now,
in the Big 10, there's been 4.
Let's look down the road. USC, right? USC, yeah, they're in. I believe that the Pac-12 is going to explode.
Okay.
And it will as soon as the Big Ten says it will.
Right.
When the Big Ten's ready, the Pac-12's done. They're going to get Oregon, Washington, Cal, Stanford.
And then the other ones are
going to go to happen. They're going to go to the Big 12.
Yeah.
And I don't, the one that would bother me in the Big 12 would be Utah. They're really good, and they're like BYU. They're tough, and they're hard to beat. Colorado, not so much. Arizona State don't really impress me, but they're along for the ride. They've got nowhere to go. They're like private Mayo, but they. I think that's still. I don't know when that's going to happen, but the USC is going to happen, and so that's another one to jump over. But that's the world we live in, Sam. Every league now is like that. The SEC is like that. My God, I mean, and you're bringing in Oklahoma and Texas. Yeah. I mean, Oklahoma and Texas are in for a big shock.
They are,
and so, but they'll adjust. Because especially Oklahoma will adjust because Oklahoma cares about winning. They care deeply about winning. Texas, sometimes I think they just want to be Texas. But so I think the answer to your question, I still think the Big Ten is probably the better, but not by much. I mean, because you're talking about in Big 12 1. I mean,
that's right. You have to win the Big 12.
How often is that going to happen? Well, again, Cincinnati and Houston are going to be the 2 best jobs in the league because they're around players. They're around a lot of players, and now they're suddenly in this league where it's a better job. It's a better job, a better deal for them. So, and don't forget BYU. They're going to come in. They may make the play. They may win the Big 12. So, just by being BYU. No. I'm not going to say any more. But
so the question is, like,
it's a great question.
Of those 2.
Yeah.
And the point is that Leipold and Aranda and Kleiman all have to examine that question. Let's say Wisconsin offered them the job too. They have to examine. You can't just look at it and go, well, Nebraska's a better school than Kansas. That is true. But can I do what I want to do, which is make one stinking playoff from Kansas more easily than I can from Nebraska?
I don't think you can do it at KU or K-State. I just don't. I've covered those teams. I know.
And here's a jar dropper for you. Kansas has had, in the last 15 years, and you know this too, Kansas has had a better football season in the last 15 years than Nebraska has.
Right, and I understand that. But when,
Kansas would have made the playoff in 07 if there was a 12-team playoff.
I understand that. But when you bring in these guys, Nebraska at its best is always better than KU or K-State at its best.
I agree.
Always, 100%.
Don't you think it's harder for Nebraska to get to its best, though, in the Big Ten?
No, I don't. I don't understand why it would be, because the other guys don't do much. The other guys are who they are. I mean, they're solid. They're well coached. They're not always ambitious. I think PJ Fleck is ambitious. I think Wisconsin wants to be Wisconsin. Iowa wants to be Iowa.
Right.
On down the line. I don't think Illinois is ambitious. The key to me, it's interesting, will be when you take away the Rose Bowl, which they will eventually, and they kind of have now. You win the Big Ten, you still go to the Rose Bowl, but eventually that's not going to be the case. I think a Rose Bowl is just, I don't know what it's going to
start next year. I mean, starting when the playoff goes to 12,
I don't know what
the Big Ten champion is going to host a playoff game on their campus.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it's going to be. So the playoff will replace the Rose Bowl. So you take away the two divisions. Now these guys are all fighting for sixth place in the Big 12 North or the Big 10 West. They're all fighting for fifth or sixth or seventh place.
That's right.
Does that change? If you're Wisconsin, do you suddenly start, wait a minute, I better get off my duff and try to get in the playoff? Do you start to become more ambitious? And I'm not sure they would argue that they already are ambitious. I disagree.
They just fired Paul Christ.
I disagree. Well, that was to make sure they got Jim Leonard.
Sure.
I believe that.
I believe it too.
Just from what I've seen, observed over here in Omaha, Nebraska.
No, I get it.
The west coast of all this Big Ten crazy stuff. I see a league that is not ambitious. Ohio State is ambitious. Ohio State has a motor that never quits. They're different. Are they different because they're in Columbus, Ohio? No. Yes, Ohio football players everywhere. They're different because they care more. They want more.
Sure.
They're always on. I don't think Michigan's that way. I really don't.
Pretty good team.
But they care. But what drives them was Ohio State too.
Sure.
So I think
the Michigan Nebraska is going to face in 3 weeks is going to be a team that Nebraska doesn't want to play very often.
I hear Trev say, okay, we want to develop, we want to be the grinders, but he also wants to win big. Those two can go hand in hand, but the first part has to be you got to grind, you got to build, and then you can go after it. Nebraska has the wherewithal, the passion to go beat Ohio State. We want to do that. We can do that. That's what they're saying, but they've got to fix it first. And so I think you sell the Randas. Okay, are you a dreamer? Do you want to do this? If you do, you can do it here. But first, we have to build. And the expectations will not be high. They will be higher later. But first, everybody understands, and I think most do, that it has to be done right the first time. So let's start at the bottom, and then let's move up, and then let's go after it then. And how long does that take? I don't know. You have to get a little lucky. You have to catch a break. You have to, But I think,
well,
I believe this is a better job than any job in the Big 12. This is a better job than any job in the Big 12.
Very soon, in 2 years, 2024. Illinois is peer set, and let's say Illinois is 6-1 right now. And they're having a great season. They're 18th in the country. I'm not exaggerating when I say it's possible that Illinois could go 11-1. It's possible. There's no team left on its schedule, I don't think.
Sure.
That's gonna that's gonna scare anybody.
Right.
That's gonna scare anybody to death. I have to look at it really quickly and make sure that I'm not talking out my rear end. I don't think I am. Well, they have Michigan. So they play at Michigan, but okay, so they could finish very simple. They could finish 10-2, and that would be very hard to do. In 2 years' time, they will not be playing Northwestern, Purdue, Nebraska, Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, and every year. It's going to change.
Yeah.
And they're going to have to be, and just like Nebraska, will have to be exposed. Nebraska's actually used to this because Nebraska got all the lousy schedules from the Big Ten, but Nebraska is going to have to get used to the reality of playing USC and UCLA. They're just going to. And so the challenge, I think, for Nebraska in this league is you've got to be able to convince a coach to come here and then give them all the resources possible to do what any coach wants to do, which isn't go 8-4. So, like, the media narrative around here is like, I think people, me, whatever, we would be just happy with 7-5 or 8-4 because we're tired of covering crap teams. A coach doesn't think like that. A coach thinks, I want to go somewhere where I can win championships.
Right.
And you can, to be clear, I think if you took Nebraska and put it in the Big 12 in the last 5 years, they would have won a lot more games than they did in the Big 10. Because I think the Big 10 is a way better league than the Big 12, personally. I could be wrong, but I think they're way better. The problem is Nebraska doesn't have that luxury. They have to be in the league that is just a little bit below the SEC. And I wouldn't want to put Nebraska in the SEC West right now, and I don't like Nebraska in that new Big 10 unless they get a lot better. Because they can get a little bit better and incrementally better, and they can be 7-5 or 8-4. I want to ask you this question: Did it surprise you that Trev Alberts' metrics for Scott Frost was merely to go 6-6?
Surprised me they didn't just say that. I mean, we all knew that, right? We all said that was a no-brainer. You got to go to a bowl game, right? He can't come back without a bowl game, right? No. Right. So that was a no-brainer. So why don't you just come out and say that?
I don't know.
I mean, maybe it becomes a distraction. That's, maybe it's different when the AD says it and everybody's talking about it all the time. And no, I don't know. I just it was just USA Today. I look open records. I'm all for it, but they're pounding their table on that just for that. I thought it was interesting. I was not surprised, but why don't you just come out and say that?
If the 6-6 was good enough for Scott Frost to get his old contract back, should it be good enough for Mickey Joseph to get the permanent job?
Yeah, interesting. Yes, unless problem with this, Sam, is as I wrote the other day, by the time we know he's going to get 6-6 or not, you got to have the coach hired.
That's right.
You got to have a guy ready to go.
Going into the last weekend trying to figure that out.
It's too late.
Too late.
And you know what? If you got the guy you want, it doesn't look. People are mad. Too bad. This is how it. That's why they pay Trev the big bucks to go do the big moves and take the gambles and make the big decisions. And so timing will get Mickey, but I sit here and go, God, what if they have not Aranda, because Aranda will keep Mickey, they'll all live happily ever after.
Yeah.
But what if it is Campbell or Leipold and Mickey beats Iowa? We had the emotions of beating Iowa out there, going to a bowl game, carried off the field.
They would carry him off the field.
Here we go.
Yeah.
It's 2003 all over again. How dare you bring in somebody else? Then you would need Mickey to step up and go, hey, it's cool.
So long as you give me $1 million to stay, I will.
Well,
he's worth $1 million, I think, as an assistant.
If he gets to 5 wins by then, you bet he's going to be part of the deal.
Yeah, I agree.
Don't you think?
Yes.
So I don't.
Yes, I do.
I think it'll be a soap opera and it'll be kind of interesting, but I think I think all that'll work out.
Trev made him the interim head coach.
Yeah,
he did it, He could have made Mark Whipple. Mark Whipple knows how to coach a football team. He's done it his whole life. He didn't make Mark Whipple the head coach. He made Mickey. So I have to think that Trev kind of knew that if they caught fire, that Mickey's going to be part of any deal going forward. Don't you?
What I think is if it's all the cards on the table now, okay, and right now we're talking to agents, right? We're not talking to the head coach yet. I don't think we are. But talking to agents, all cards on the table, are you okay with this or not? If it's not, thank you. We got to move on. Now,
I'm with you.
You got to be careful with that because you run out of candidates. You don't want to be stuck there in November with, I don't have anybody I want because I said this. It's kind of a tightrope.
Right. I agree with you. Yep. That's a good point. Okay, let's talk a little basketball before we get out here.
Sure.
Fred Hoiberg talked at Big Ten Media Days last week. Amy Williams talked there too. Two very different teams. We'll talk about the men. I think Fred said all the right things, to be honest with you. I think he's tried to take as many positive steps that are the direct opposite of what they did last year. I just don't know if it's going to work.
Well, there's no metrics with Trev or with Fred, but what would be enough to get him back? See, I think it's they don't have an identity, and that's a great sports writer word, but it's true. You can't just change how you play in the middle of the the whole thing.
And they are going to try.
Yeah, they're going to try. And I think they need somebody. They need something big from somebody. I think that somebody is Derek Walker. The Big Ten is it's a big man league. It's a big shoulders league in basketball. If you can get, and I'm not sure how well they're going to be able to shoot outside, but they have to find a calling card. They have to find something that works. And they have to keep going to it. And I think he has to have a really big year for any of this to work. Now, what if they win 10, 12? I don't know Trev's deal with college basketball. I don't know if he knows what he wants. I just know he knows he didn't want what happened last year. And so I don't know. But again, you bring Fred back again next year. Again, you probably got a whole new team coming in again, and it's just, I want to see how it looks. I want to see how they play this way, if they can coach this way. I mean, I don't know. It's not Fred. It's just nothing about this is him. So I'm really, but I know people who know him that I know. Say that he really wants us to work, and he's very prideful, very angry about last year, and so he's willing to do whatever he can to make this work. So I'm just not sure it will. I know is they probably the Creighton game. They're not going to win that game.
No,
But it's the other games.
No.
Don't lose to the other guys on the schedule, the non-conference. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't fall into that's what can really get you. So, Northwestern comes into the vault. Don't lose by 20. They
always do.
It's just
they do. I said they can't beat Northwestern. I'm going to ask you a question that I think will actually answer another one, which I asked this to Jimmy yesterday. How many players down Creighton's roster do you have to go before you get to Nebraska's best player? The whole starting five?
You mean what? Say that again. I'm trying to.
How many players do you have to go down Creighton's roster?
Yeah.
Before you get to Nebraska's best player? In other words, how many Creighton players are better than Nebraska's best player?
Oh. Who's their best player?
Well, honestly, I think it's probably Sam Griesel.
Okay.
And I can think of 6 guys that are maybe better than Sam on Creighton's team. That's not an exaggeration.
10, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know.
I saw them scrimmage last week, and their second five could do well in the Big East. Not win it, certainly, but make the tournament, maybe not. But their second five is pretty damn good. They've got this kid King, the 7-footer they just got, is an NBA body. He's going to play in the NBA one day.
Nebraska feels like it has a center that's going to play in the NBA and Blaise Keita, but I haven't seen him.
Yeah, I really trust Creighton's their eye for talent, the personnel selection. A lot of times it is what fits into our program, but those guys all can play. I'd say at least 10.
Well, that tells you something.
The TCU kid, the transfer is really good. I mean, Sharif Mitchell is bouncing off the walls, playing hard.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to answer that question because I don't want to upset the Nebraska fan is already so beaten down. Don't want to rub his nose in it.
Right. I don't know if it's 10, but it's a lot.
I think
and that's part of the issue.
I think it's 10. And I haven't seen Griesel play. You people, well, what's the difference between Shireman and Griesel? They both came out of that league. I don't know. I've not seen enough out of either one of them yet. But so I don't. I mean, it's the way I say all this, not having ever seen Sam play for any period of time. So I'm anxious to see him play. I think I wish he had 2 or 3 more years left.
Yeah.
He's the kind of guy you build a program around. Sort of like a Chucky Hepburn type of Wisconsin.
Right.
You build around him. He's the man. And I think they have that guy, but he's just here for a year. Just sort of says it a lot about Nebraska's program. That's too little, too late.
That's the point. That I think that question answers a lot. In reality, that there's a lot of things that Fred could try to do this year, but if that team wins 17 games and they go to the NIT, I'm serious. He's the coach of the year.
I agree,
because I think this may be the weakest roster, top to bottom, that they've had in a long time. Now, I don't doubt that Fred Koiber can coach them to 17 wins, but if he does it, then Nebraska's got a coach on its hands, because I just don't think the roster is as talented as it has been.
I think they have the leader in place, and I think Walker's also that leader. If they can get a 2-man inside-outside game going, if Walker is a force inside and can score, and they get anybody who can make a 3, anybody who can shoot outside, then I give them a chance to have a chance at something. But they got to have both. They can't just have one. They got to have both. Is Sam the outside shooter? I don't know that he is. I think they have to have somebody else. The SMU kid. I don't know what that's his deal or not. I just don't know.
Vandemel?
I just don't know. Yeah,
they'd like for it to be. I don't know that it is.
I'm just saying they've got to have a surprise.
Yeah. And
we'll see. But Amy's program is she built it year by year, and that's kind of what you need to do in the Big Ten. Sean Eichhorst introduced her. I'll never forget that.
That's right.
So he left Nebraska.
He made one good hire.
He left Nebraska something good.
We're going to get out on that. Sean Eichhorst mentioned An Officer and a Gentleman mention. That's a heck of a movie.
It is very good.
About 40 years old now. It's a really good one, though.
Louis Gossett.
Yeah, that's right. Mayonnaise.
The king.
All right. For Tom, I'm Sam. Thanks for listening to the Pick Six podcast this week. We'll be back next week to preview Nebraska, Illinois, and ask maybe the question, how in the hell did Illinois get this good, this fast, and Nebraska hasn't been able to figure it out over the last decade? Thanks, Husker fans.